The woman your father should have married. That's what I found written in my dead husband's handwriting. In a love letter to my sister, dated 3 weeks after our wedding. The ink was faded but perfectly legible. Blue ballpoint on cream stationery. The same stationery I'd bought him for Christmas that year. I remembered picking it out at the department store, wondering if it was too fancy, wondering if he'd think I was showing off. He'd written love letters to my sister on paper I'd given him. For 31 years, I believed I was the problem. The difficult daughter, the wife who couldn't manage money, the mother who somehow raised children who barely tolerated her. I was 62 years old before I learned the truth. Every single thing I believed about myself was a lie they'd built together. Let me tell you how I found out. And what I did about it. Richard died on a Tuesday in April. The forsythia was blooming in our front yard, bright yellow against the gray sky. I remember staring at it through the kitchen window, thinking how cheerful it looked, how wrong that seemed. Massive heart attack at his desk. The paramedics said he was probably gone before he hit the floor. His coffee was still warm when they found him. Half drunk. 2 sugars, no cream. The way he'd taken it for 3 decades. I'd been married to him for 31 years. We'd raised 2 children together, shared a bed, shared meals, shared a life that I thought I understood. And when they told me he was dead, do you know what I felt? I felt guilty that I didn't feel more. The officer who came to the door was young, maybe 25. He had kind eyes and nervous hands. He kept adjusting his hat while he spoke. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that he was doing fine. But my mouth wouldn't form the words. I made him coffee. Can you imagine? My husband had just died and I was making coffee for a stranger. Because that's what you do. That's what I'd been trained to do. Make people comfortable. Don't make a scene. Don't be difficult. The funeral was well attended. Richard had a lot of colleagues, a lot of acquaintances who shook my hand and said, what a wonderful man he was. How lucky I'd been. How much he'd done for me over the years. The funeral home smelled like lilies and furniture polish. Too sweet. Cloying. It stuck in my throat like honey gone bad. He was so devoted to you, one woman said. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks in gray rivulets. I didn't even know who she was. The way he took care of everything, you could tell how much he loved you. I nodded and accepted another casserole. Tuna, I think, or maybe chicken. They all started to look the same after a while. By the end of the day, I had enough casseroles to feed a small army. 23 of them stacked in my refrigerator. I counted. I don't know why I counted. Maybe because counting was something to do. Something that made sense. I thought about freezing them. Then I thought about eating casseroles alone for the next 3 months. Sitting at that long dining table by myself. The chair across from me empty. Silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock. I gave most of them to the neighbors. Kept 3. Ones that looked homemade. The night after the funeral, I sat in Richard's chair. The leather recliner he'd claimed 20 years ago. It still held the shape of it. The indentation where his body had pressed for countless evenings. Where he'd read his newspaper, watched his shows, fallen asleep after dinner while I cleaned the kitchen. My chair, he always said. Like everything else was just on loan from him. The leather creaked as I settled into it. Cold, at first, then warming slowly from my body heat. I could smell his aftershave, that sandalwood scent I'd bought him every Christmas. It clung to the headrest like a ghost. I poured myself a glass of wine, Merlot, a bottle we'd opened 3 nights ago. Before everything changed, then another glass. Then I finished the bottle. The wine was too warm, slightly sour on my tongue, but I kept drinking anyway, waiting for something to shift inside me. I kept waiting to feel something. Grief, relief, anger, anything at all. Instead, I just felt tired. The same bone-deep exhaustion I'd felt for years. The kind of tired that sleep never fixed. The kind that lived in your marrow, that made your limbs feel like they were filled with wet sand. He'd been a good husband. That's what I'd always told myself. That's what everyone told me. Steady, reliable, patient with my many flaws. He handled the money because I wasn't good with numbers. He managed our social calendar because I always said the wrong thing. He spoke to my doctors privately because I got confused about my symptoms. He made the decisions because I got overwhelmed by choices. Looking back, I can see every bar of the cage, the way it was built around me slowly, one bar at a time. So gradually, I never noticed I was being enclosed. At the time, I thought he was holding me together. I thought I was lucky to have someone so patient, someone willing to manage a woman as difficult as me. The week after the funeral, I started clearing out his office. Richard had been very particular about that room. The door was always closed, oak paneling on the walls, heavy burgundy curtains that blocked the afternoon sun. Books arranged by height, then by color, everything in its place. It was his space, his sanctuary, the one room I wasn't supposed to enter without permission. I'd learned years ago not to disturb things in there. He didn't like it when I moved his papers. He got quiet, that disappointed quiet that somehow felt worse than yelling. The way he'd look at me without speaking, the small sigh he'd release. The way he'd carefully rearrange whatever I'd touched, never saying anything was wrong, just making it clear that I'd failed again. That I couldn't even be trusted to leave his things alone. But Richard was gone now. His office door stood open. Dust motes drifted in the morning light. The room smelled stale, unused, like a museum exhibit of a life that was over, and someone had to sort through the files. Our daughter Melissa said she'd help, but she was so busy with her own life. Maybe next weekend, Mom? I just have so much going on. Her voice distant, already thinking about something else. Our son David lived 3 states away and couldn't take time off from work. You understand, don't you? It's a bad time. But call me if you find anything important. Neither of them seemed particularly devastated, if I'm honest. Melissa had cried at the funeral. But it was brief, controlled. The kind of tears you produce because they're expected. David had flown in and out in 36 hours. Shook hands, made small talk, kept checking his phone. That probably should have told me something. About the family Richard and I had built. About what we'd really created in those 31 years. On the first day, I organized the easy things. Tax returns going back 15 years. Insurance papers with Richard's handwriting in the margins. Warranty documents for appliances we no longer owned. A toaster from 1987. A television we donated a decade ago. Richard kept everything, filed meticulously in green hanging folders, labeled precisely in his small, neat handwriting. Taxes 1995 to 2000. Insurance, auto, household, receipts. He was organized like that. Everything in its place. Everything documented. Everything under control. I used to find it reassuring. All that order, all that careful attention. Now, alone in his office, it felt different. Obsessive, controlling. Like evidence of something I didn't want to name. On the second day, I found the photographs. A box of them, unlabeled, shoved in the back of a drawer. Cardboard, worn at the corners, the kind of box that had been opened many times. Me, mostly. Me, at various ages. Me, at parties and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays, standing in the kitchen, sitting on the porch, walking ahead of the camera, not knowing I was being watched. But in every single photo, I had the same expression. That tight smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The smile of a woman trying. Always trying. Never quite getting it right. The look of someone trying very hard to be happy. The look of someone who's forgotten what happy actually feels like. I stared at those photos for a long time. Spread them out on his desk. looked at myself through the decades, the changing hairstyles, the weight that came and went, the lines that slowly deepened around my eyes, but always that same expression, that same desperate frozen smile. I couldn't remember posing for any of them. I didn't remember Richard taking pictures. He wasn't the type. Or so I'd thought, but there I was, year after year, decade after decade, frozen in that same careful smile, like he'd been cataloging something, documenting my performance, keeping records. Why would a husband take secret photos of his wife for 30 years? Why would he hide them in a drawer? What was he looking for in my face? I found the box on the third day. It was in the back of his closet behind a filing cabinet. I almost missed it. Almost didn't look behind the cabinet at all. But something made me move the furniture. A feeling, a prickle at the back of my neck. The sense that I was being led somewhere I didn't want to go. Small box. Maybe 8 inches by 10. Fireproof, the kind you buy at office supply stores. Graimetai, locked with a small brass padlock. I'd never seen it before. In 31 years of marriage, 31 years of sharing this house, I had never seen this box. Richard had never mentioned it. Never said, if anything happens to me, there's a box in my closet. Never said, this is where I keep important things. He'd hidden it. Deliberately. From me? I sat on the closet floor with the box in my lap. His suits hung above me. Gray. Navy. Charcoal. The uniform of a respectable man. They still smelled like him. That aftershave. That ghost. I looked for a key for 2 hours. Desk drawers, emptied and searched. Jewelry box, the few cufflinks and tie clips sorted through. The little ceramic dish where he kept loose change. Pennies and dimes and no key. I checked his wallet, his key ring, the pockets of every jacket in his closet. Nothing. I could have just let it go. Put the box back, slid the filing cabinet in front of it, pretended I'd never found it. That's what the old Margaret would have done. The Margaret who didn't want to make trouble. The Margaret who assumed there must be a good reason for everything. The Margaret who trusted that she was being protected, that the things kept from her were kept for her own good. Instead, I called a locksmith. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. I need someone to open a lock. Today? Now. Today? Now. He was a young man, maybe 30. Arrived within the hour, had kind eyes and oil-stained hands. His name tag said Marcus. He looked at the box, looked at me, looked at the box again. Shouldn't take long, he said. Standard lock. He had the padlock open in under a minute. Click. Such a small sound. Such an ordinary sound. For something that was about to destroy everything. He looked at me with concern when he finished with the lock. Studied my face in that way people do when they're worried. Everything okay, ma'am? You look a little pale. I caught my reflection in the closet mirror. He was right. I looked like paper, like something the color had drained out of. I told him yes. Everything was fine. I was just organizing my late husband's papers. Normal widow tasks. Nothing to worry about. He probably wondered why a widow would need to break into her husband's safe. Why she wouldn't have the key. What secrets a husband might keep from a wife of 30 years. I gave him a $20 tip anyway. For not asking questions. For letting me pretend this was normal. For leaving quickly so I could fall apart in private. The door closed behind him. I heard his truck start in the driveway, pull away, disappear down the street. Then I was alone. With the box? With whatever Richard had kept hidden from me. Inside, there were 3 manila folders, thick, stuffed with papers. The kind of folders that hold secrets. I sat on Richard's office floor. Couldn't make it to the chair. My legs wouldn't carry me that far. The carpet was beige. Industrial. The kind that hides stains and shows nothing. It smelled like him, that aftershave he'd worn for decades. sandalwood and secrets. The scent used to make me feel safe, used to mean home, used to mean the man who took care of me. Now it just made my stomach clench. For a moment, I almost closed the box and put it back. My hands hovered over the folders, trembling. Whatever was in there, Richard clearly hadn't wanted me to see. He'd locked it away, hidden it behind furniture, kept it secret for God knows how long. Maybe some things were better left unknown. Maybe I could just go back to being the woman who didn't ask questions, the woman who trusted, the woman who didn't know. Ignorance is protection. Isn't that what they say? What you don't know can't hurt you. But that's a lie, isn't it? What you don't know can destroy you. It just destroys you silently. While you smile and pretend everything is fine, I opened the first folder anyway, because I was 62 years old. And I was so damn tired of being protected from my own life. So tired of being the woman who didn't know things. The woman things were done to. The woman who smiled through everything. My fingers felt numb as I lifted the flap. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. That heavy, insistent rhythm. The rhythm of something about to break. The first folder contained greeting cards. Birthday cards with flowers on the front. Christmas cards with snowmen and wreaths. Anniversary cards with embossed hearts. Thinking of you. Cards with watercolor landscapes. Stacks and stacks of them. Dozens. Maybe 100. All of them addressed to me. My name in familiar handwriting. Margaret Morrison. The name I'd taken when I married Richard. All of them from my parents. My mother's looping script. My father's blocky print. Postmarks spanning decades. All of them unopened. I should explain about my parents. My mother and father lived in a small town about 4 hours from us. Pine Creek, it was called. A nothing town. A beautiful town. The kind of place where everyone knows your business. Where the diner serves the same breakfast it served in 1965. Where the lake freezes solid in winter and fills with swimmers in summer. Growing up, we were close. Not a perfect family, we had our squabbles. My mother could be stubborn. My father was quiet, sometimes too quiet. I was dramatic, prone to tears. But we were a real family. The kind that eats dinner together, the kind that argues and makes up, the kind that shows up. My father taught me to fish off the dock at their lake house. Sundays, just the two of us, not talking much. The water lapping against the wooden posts. The creak of the old rowboat. The plop of the line hitting the surface. Just being together. Just existing in the same space. Sometimes that's all love needs to be. My mother taught me to make her lemon cake. The one she made for every birthday, every celebration, standing in her kitchen with flour on my hands. The windows steamed from the oven. Her voice guiding me through each step. The secret was more zest than the recipe called for. Almost double. Until your arm ached from grating. Until the whole kitchen smelled like sunshine. Recipes are suggestions, she used to say. Mothers know best. I can still hear her voice when I close my eyes. That warm, practical tone. The way she hummed while she measured ingredients. The way she squeezed my shoulder when I got something right. I was their only child for 7 years before my sister Patricia came along. Some people might have been jealous. 7 years of being the center of everything. Then suddenly a baby. A demanding, crying, attention-consuming baby. But I loved being a big sister. I used to carry Patricia around on my hip like she was mine, pretending to be her mother. Feeding her bottles, singing her to sleep. I taught her to ride a bike, held the back of the seat while she wobbled, ran alongside her until she found her balance, cheered when she finally rode alone. I helped her with her homework, math problems and book reports, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. Patient in a way I wasn't patient about anything else. I thought we'd be close forever. Sisters, best friends, the way it's supposed to be. And then, somewhere in my 30s, things changed. It happened so gradually I didn't notice at first. My parents started pulling away. Phone calls got shorter. Visits felt strained. There were silences where there used to be conversation. They stopped calling as often. Weeks would go by without hearing from them. I'd call and get the answering machine, leave messages that went unreturned. When I visited, they seemed distant. My mother would hug me, but it felt formal. My father would shake my hand instead of embracing me. They'd exchange looks I couldn't interpret. Something was wrong. Something had shifted. But when I asked, they said everything was fine. We're just tired, Margaret. We're not as young as we used to be. Tired of me. That's what I heard. Even if they didn't say it, my father wouldn't look me in the eye. He'd find reasons to leave the room. Suddenly need to check on something in the garage. Remember an errand he had to run. My mother made excuses too. Dishes that needed washing. Phone calls she had to make. Anything to avoid being alone with me. Eventually, they asked me not to come anymore. The phone call came on a Thursday. I remember because I just made Richard's dinner. Pot roast. His favorite. The house smelled like rosemary and slow-cooked meat. "We need space, Margaret," my mother said. Her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Flat. Final. The voice of a stranger wearing my mother's words. "You need to figure out your own problems. We can't keep rescuing you." I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear. The pot roast growing cold on the counter, my heart cracking down the middle. I didn't know what she meant. What problems? What rescuing? I hadn't asked them for anything. I hadn't done anything wrong. Had I asked, my voice small and confused. "Mom, what are you talking about?" What did I do? She hung up, without answering, without explaining. Just the click of the line going dead, the dial tone humming in my ear. I stood there for a long time, holding the receiver, trying to understand. The pot roast got cold. Richard came home and found me still standing there. "What's wrong now?" he asked. Not, "What's wrong?" What's wrong now? Like I was always wrong about something. Richard said I must have done something to offend them. He sat me down at the kitchen table, took my hands in his, looked at me with those concerned eyes. He couldn't imagine what, he said. But clearly I'd hurt them somehow. Said something I didn't remember. Done something without realizing. You know how you get, Margaret. You don't always notice when you've upset people. You can be intense. He suggested I give them space. Maybe write instead of calling. Letters were safer. Less chance of saying the wrong thing. Less chance of my intensity coming through. Be patient. Don't be pushy. Don't make things worse. That was my problem, he said. I pushed too hard. I wanted too much. I made people uncomfortable with my need. So I wrote letters. So many letters. Pages and pages, pouring out my heart. Apologizing for whatever I'd done. Begging them to tell me what it was. Promising to do better. To be better. To be whatever they needed me to be. I never got replies. Weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. I kept writing anyway. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every time I saw something that reminded me of them. Nothing came back. No letters. No calls. No acknowledgement that I existed at all. Eventually, Patricia called to tell me our parents had moved. Into her house, actually. They'd sold the house I grew up in. The lake house where Dad taught me to fish. All of it gone. They needed care, Patricia said. Their health was declining. They couldn't live alone anymore. And I wasn't capable of providing what they needed. Patricia said this like it was obvious. Like everyone knew. Like it was a fact that had been established long ago. Margaret can't handle responsibility. Margaret can't be trusted with important things. Margaret is the difficult one. I was not invited to help. Not consulted about their care. Not asked what I thought. Not told where they were going. I was not given the new address. When I asked Patricia for it, she changed the subject. When I pressed, she got irritated. "They don't want to see you, Margaret." How many ways do I need to say it? When I asked to visit, Patricia said Wasn't a good time. Mom was tired. Dad was having a bad day. The house was being renovated. Next month would be better. Definitely next month. For 7 years, it was never a good time. For 7 years, I had a family I couldn't reach. Parents who lived in my sister's house like hostages. Parents who'd forgotten they ever loved me. My mother died on a Thursday in October. The leaves were turning when I got the news. Red and gold outside my window. Beautiful and dying, like everything else. I found out 3 days later, not from a call, not from a message, from Patricia's assistant of all people, calling to coordinate schedules. Wait, I said. What do you mean, the memorial service? What happened to my mother? Silence on the other end. Then a fumbled apology. I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew. Mrs. Patterson passed on Thursday. Very peaceful, they said. Patricia said she hadn't wanted to bother me. When I finally got her on the phone, her voice cool and distant, like we were discussing a stranger. You weren't close, Margaret. I didn't think you'd care. The funeral was small, family only. I was not considered family. 37 years of being Helen Patterson's daughter. And I wasn't considered family. The service happened without me. The eulogy was read without me. My mother was buried without me there to say goodbye. I drove to the cemetery after, found her grave through the records office. Helen Marie Patterson. Beloved mother. But not my beloved mother, apparently. I sat by her grave in the rain. The October rain, cold and relentless, soaking through my coat, turning the earth to mud. I talked to her for hours, told her about my life, about the grandchildren she'd never met, about the letters I'd written, about how much I'd missed her. I apologized for whatever I'd done, whatever terrible thing I'd said or didn't say, whatever I'd done to make her stop loving me. I beg her to forgive me. My words lost in the rain, swallowed by the mud and the gray sky. No answer came. Of course it didn't. She was gone. And I'd never know why she'd left me first. My father died 14 months later. I wasn't there for that either. Patricia told me days after, her voice neutral on the phone, like she was reading from a script. He'd asked for me at the end, she said, called my name, wanted his older daughter. She said she told him I was too busy to come, that I'd sent my love, that I was thinking of him. I hadn't known he was dying. No one told me. No one thought I needed to know. My father lay in a bed calling for me, and I was 4 hours away, making dinner, watching television, living my life, not knowing. The will left everything to Patricia. The house I grew up in sold proceeds to Patricia. The investments my father had built over 50 years to Patricia. The lake house where he taught me to fish to Patricia. Every photograph, every memory, every piece of my childhood, gone. Richard said that made sense. When I showed him the lawyer's letter, his face reasonable, his tone understanding. She'd been the one caring for them, he said. She'd been there. I'd been the absent daughter, the one who couldn't be bothered. What did I expect? What did I expect? I expected to grieve. I expected to mourn my parents like a normal daughter, to feel the loss, to weep, to rage. Instead, I just felt empty, like something had been carved out of me and I hadn't noticed until it was gone. A hollow space where my history used to be, an ache that had no edges. Now, sitting on Richard's office floor, I opened the first card, my hands shaking. The paper yellowed with age, the envelope carefully sliced open with a letter opener. But the card inside had never been removed. It was a birthday card from my mother, dated 12 years ago. A watercolor of flowers on the front. The kind of cards you buy when you're thinking of someone, when you want them to know they matter. My darling Margaret, it read. My mother's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Those looping letters, that particular way she made her M's. I don't know why you've stopped writing. Patricia says you're very busy with your life, But I miss you so much. Please call. Please come home. I don't care what we argued about. I don't even remember what it was. I just want my daughter back. Love always, Mom." I sat very still, the card trembling in my hands. My mother's words blurring as tears filled my eyes. I read it again. And again. And again. The words didn't change. I'd never stopped writing. I wrote every month for years. Long letters about my life, about Melissa's first steps, about David's graduation, about how much I missed them, about how sorry I was, about how I wished things could go back to normal. I'd never stopped, but somehow they thought I had. I'd never argued with my mother, not the way the letter suggested. Not in a way that would make her ask forgiveness. What was she talking about? What argument did she not remember? There was no argument, because there was never an argument. Someone told her there was. Someone made her believe I'd stopped writing. Someone intercepted my letters. Someone answered with lies. I opened another card, this one from my father. 2 years before he died. The handwriting was shaky. He'd been ill by then, I guess. His hands not as steady as they used to be. Ill, and I didn't know. Dying, and I didn't know. Needing me, and I didn't know. Margaret, if you get this, please know we never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry for whatever I did wrong. Your sister says you want nothing to do with us. But I don't believe her anymore. Something isn't right. I tried to call, but your number doesn't work. Please call if you can. Please. Your father who loves you. I made a sound I didn't recognize. Something between a gasp and a howl. It came from somewhere deep inside me. Somewhere I'd kept locked for years. My father had been reaching out for me, his hands shaking, his heart failing, trying to find his daughter. He died thinking I'd abandoned him, that I'd chosen to stay away, that I didn't love him anymore, and I'd been right here, 4 hours away, desperate to see him, desperate for any word at all, wondering why he didn't love me anymore. I opened every card in the folder, 15 years of them, 123 cards total. I counted later. I counted everything later. Birthday cards with hopeful messages. Maybe this year we can see each other? I made your favorite cake. Wish you were here to eat it. Christmas cards with sad notes in the margins. The house feels empty without you. Patricia says you're happy. I hope she's right. Thinking of you, cards that wondered where I'd gone. What happened to us, Margaret? Where did my little girl go? My parents had never stopped loving me. They'd never pushed me away. They'd spent 15 years reaching for me, writing letters I never received, calling numbers that had been changed, wondering what they'd done wrong. Someone had made them believe I'd pushed them. Someone had answered my letters with cruelty. Someone had told them lies about fights that never happened. Someone had changed my phone number without telling me. Someone had built a wall between us, brick by brick, and that same someone had hidden the evidence. For years, in a box, in my husband's closet. My husband, the man I'd trusted with everything. The man who'd held me while I cried over parents who didn't love me. The man who'd told me I must have done something wrong. The man who'd suggested I give them space. Who'd told me I pushed too hard. Who'd convinced me I was the problem. He'd known. All along, he'd known and he'd let me suffer. I opened the second folder with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My vision blurred with tears. My chest so tight I could barely breathe. But I had to see, I had to know, it contained 2 documents, both wills, both notarized, both with my parents' signatures, both claiming to be my parents' final wishes. The first will was dated 8 years before my mother's death. Heavy legal paper. Official stamps. Proper witnessing. It left their entire estate to me, their beloved daughter Margaret, with a small bequest to Patricia, who has been provided for through her husband's family. There was a handwritten note at the bottom in my father's writing, those blocky letters I knew so well. The handwriting from 1,000 birthday cards, from notes in my lunchbox, from the margins of books he'd lent me. For Margaret, who always remembered our anniversary when no one else did. For Margaret, who called every Sunday until the phone was disconnected. You are a good daughter. Don't let anyone tell you different. We love you. I pressed my fingers against those words, like I could absorb them through my skin, like I could send a message back through time, like I could tell him I heard him. That I finally understood. I know, Dad. I know now. I never stopped calling. I never stopped writing. I never stopped loving you. I was right here the whole time. The second will was dated 6 months before my mother died. Same heavy paper, same official appearance, but different. Colder, clinical. This one left everything to Patricia. It described me as estranged by her own choice, cut out completely, not even a token amount, as if I'd never existed. As if 37 years of being their daughter meant nothing. The signatures looked similar, but not identical. To my eye, not a lawyer's eye, just a daughter's eye, they looked traced. A careful forgery by someone with time and practice. Someone who'd had access to my parents' handwriting. Someone who'd studied it, copied it, perfected it. Patricia. It had to be Patricia. My baby sister. The one I'd carried on my hip. The one I'd taught to ride a bike. The one I'd helped with homework. The one I'd thought was my friend. I sat very still for a long time. The sun moved across the floor. Orange rectangles sliding over the beige carpet. Shadows shifted. The day aged around me. I didn't move. My body felt frozen. My mind felt shattered. 1,000 pieces of my life rearranged. A puzzle I'd never known was unsolved, now finally showing its true picture. The third folder was the heaviest, thick with paper, weighted with secrets. It contained a USB drive, small and black, and a stack of printed emails, hundreds of pages, maybe 1,000. 20 years of correspondence between my husband Richard and my sister Patricia. The first email was dated 2 years before our wedding. Before I was Margaret Morrison, when I was still Margaret Patterson, young and hopeful, in love with a man I thought loved me back. Richard, thank you for the lovely dinner. I shouldn't have let things go so far. But Margaret doesn't appreciate you. She never will. Someday, when the time is right, we'll have what we deserve. All my love, P. 2 years before our wedding, they'd been together before he was mine. Maybe he was never mine at all. Maybe I was just part of the plan from the beginning. The inconvenient sister standing between them. I read for 6 hours. I couldn't stop. Each email worse than the last. Each revelation more shattering. I read until my eyes burned and stung. Until the words blurred and swam on the page. Until my back screamed from sitting on the floor. Until my legs went numb beneath me. I got up once to use the bathroom, caught my reflection in the mirror, didn't recognize the woman staring back, gray-faced, hollow-eyed, old in a way I hadn't been that morning. Once to drink water from the tap, the cold water hitting my parched throat, reminding me I was still alive, still here, still breathing, even though everything I knew was dead. Then I went back to the floor and kept reading. I read the entire history of my destruction, page by page, year by year, lie by lie. They'd started with the mail. Patricia had the idea first. Her email from 1994. Casual, calculating. What if we could control what they see? She wrote, what if Margaret's letters never arrived? What if ours said something different? What if we could erase her, she meant? What if we could replace her? What if we could become her? Richard refined it. He'd always been organized, always detailed, always thorough. The same thoroughness he'd used on our taxes, on our insurance, on his meticulous filing system. He rerouted my parents' letters to a P. Box he shared with Patricia. A box I never knew existed. 20 minutes away. Check twice a week. All my parents love sitting in a metal box, waiting for someone who wasn't me. He answered some of them himself, pretending to be me, using my name, writing letters full of complaints and accusations, making demands I never made, picking fights I never picked, saying things I would never say. My parents thought I'd turned into someone they didn't recognize. A bitter, angry daughter, a stranger wearing my face. They didn't know the letters weren't from me. They didn't know their Margaret was still reaching for them, still writing with love instead of poison. Mother is devastated, Patricia wrote when I was 34. She cried for an hour after reading Margaret's letter. How could she say those things about Dad's drinking? He hasn't touched a drop in 15 years. I had to convince her not to write Margaret out of the will right then. I never wrote a letter about my father's drinking. I didn't even know he'd had a problem. He'd quit before I was old enough to remember, before I was old enough to understand. But my mother didn't know that letter wasn't real. She thought her daughter was cruelly throwing it in her face, reopening old wounds, shaming him for something he'd conquered decades ago. No wonder she'd asked for space. No wonder she'd sounded so cold. She thought I'd become a monster, because they'd turned me into one. They escalated slowly. They had time. They were patient. They were building something that had to last, a structure that had to hold for decades, a prison that had to look like love. Richard intercepted my birthday checks, the ones my parents sent every year, money I never knew about, love I never received. Patricia told my parents I'd returned them with nasty notes. She said she didn't need charity, Patricia reported. She said their money was tainted. Mom is so hurt. She cried all afternoon. I would have loved those checks. Not for the money, for what they meant, for the connection they represented, for the proof that my parents still thought of me. Richard screened my phone call, told my parents my number had changed, gave them a fake number that went to voicemail, a generic message. This number is no longer in service. Patricia told my parents I never answered because I didn't want to talk, that I'd made my choice, that I was too busy with my important life, that they should stop trying. My parents stopped trying because they thought I'd stopped first. When I tried to visit, something always came up, every single time, without fail. A work emergency for Richard. I'm so sorry, Margaret. They need me at the office. We'll have to postpone. A sick child who needed me home. David has a fever. We can't leave him with a sitter. Maybe next month? Richard's car breaking down at the last minute. The mechanic says the engine has termites. Engine termites. Very serious. Engine termites. He told me our car had engine termites. And I'd believed him. Always, Richard, gently suggesting we reschedule. His hand on my shoulder. His voice so reasonable, so understanding. Your parents probably need notice anyway. They're not as young as they used to be. I'm sure they have plans. We'll go next month? Promise. We never went. Next month never came. The plans were always canceled. The visits never happened. The first time I laughed was somewhere around page 200. Not a happy laugh. Nothing about this was happy. More of a broken, disbelieving sound. The laugh of someone whose mind is cracking, who's seeing something too absurd to process. I was reading an email where Richard complained to Patricia about the work, the effort required to maintain my isolation, the exhaustion of constant vigilance. Margaret keeps wanting to visit her parents, he wrote. Every holiday, every birthday. She brings it up constantly. Do you know how many car problems I've had to invent? I'm running out of plausible excuses. Last week I told her the engine had termites. She believed me. Sometimes I wonder what she'd believe. Anything, probably. She trusts me completely. Engine termites. My husband told me our car had engine termites. And I believed him, because why would he lie about engine termites? Why would anyone lie about something so absurd? What possible reason could there be? I'd trusted him. I'd trusted him completely. Just like he said, the plan, laid out across years of emails, was breathtaking. Meticulous, passion, the work of people who thought in decades, who played the long game, who understood that anything worth having was worth waiting for. Richard would keep me isolated and doubting myself. Convinced I was difficult, convinced I said the wrong things, convinced I needed managing. Patricia would take control of our parents and their finances. The devoted daughter, the one who was there, the one who cared. When our parents died, the new will would be executed. Patricia would get the inheritance, the house, the investments, the lake house, everything my parents had built over a lifetime. But that wasn't the end. They wanted more. They always wanted more. They wanted me gone. Not just isolated, not just estranged. Gone. The doctors are starting to believe me. Richard wrote when I was 51. I've been building this for years. I told them about her memory lapses, the paranoia, the mood swings. Henson suggested medication. This is good progress. Another few years and the diagnosis will be solid. We need to be patient. The paperwork needs to be unimpeachable. The memory lapses. Those times Richard told me I'd said things I didn't remember, done things I couldn't recall, had conversations that never happened. Don't you remember, Margaret? We talked about this yesterday. You agreed to cancel dinner with the Johnsons. You said you weren't feeling up to it. I remembered that dinner. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. Susan Johnson was one of my few remaining friends. I'd bought a new dress, made a reservation at my favorite restaurant. I'd been so confused when Richard said I'd canceled, so worried about my own mind, so scared that I was losing pieces of myself. Are you sure? I don't remember that at all. Of course I'm sure, Margaret. We talked about it right here in the kitchen. You said Susan's laugh gives you a headache. Don't you remember? I didn't remember because it never happened. Because he made it up. Because he was building a case. The paranoia. Those times I felt like something was wrong. Like people were keeping secrets. Like my own family was slipping away from me and I couldn't understand why. You're being paranoid again, Margaret. Nobody's hiding anything from you. This is exactly what I mean. This kind of thinking isn't normal. Henson should know about this. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. Something was wrong. People were keeping secrets. My family was slipping away. I just couldn't see the hands pushing them. The mood swings, my frustration when nothing made sense, my tears when my parents didn't answer my letters, my anger, rare but real, when I felt like I was going crazy. You need to get control of yourself, Margaret. This isn't healthy. I'm worried about you. We're all worried about you. Of course I had mood swings. Anyone would. Anyone watching their life crumble without understanding why. Anyone feeling the ground shift beneath their feet. But that wasn't instability. That was sanity. That was my mind trying to tell me something was wrong. They were building a case. Year by year, doctor's visit by doctor's visit, concerned comment by concerned comment, they were constructing the evidence that I was mentally unstable. A paper trail, a medical history, witnesses who would testify to my confusion, my paranoia, my deterioration, so that one day they could have me committed, locked away, silenced, forgotten, and Richard could divorce me, marry my sister with the inheritance, and whatever else I had left, the house, the retirement accounts, the children who already doubted their mother's sanity. There was even a facility picked out. Patricia had toured it, taken photos, sent Richard a detailed report. Quiet location, she wrote, very private. Outside the city, limited visiting hours. Staff discouraged from discussing patients with family. Perfect for Margaret's needs. Perfect for making me disappear. Perfect for erasing me completely. Perfect for pretending I'd never existed at all. I found the love letters last. Tucked at the bottom of the folder, handwritten, not emailed. Too dangerous to trust to servers. Too precious to share with machines. They'd been careful early on. Speaking in code, meeting at conferences. Brief encounters when I thought Richard was traveling for work. Hotel rooms in distant cities. Stolen hours while I sat at home. Trusting, waiting, wondering why he seemed distracted when he returned. But as the years passed, they'd gotten bolder, more explicit, more certain that I'd never find out, more convinced of their own cleverness. When this is finally over, Richard wrote in neat blue ink, we can stop pretending. You'll have the house. I'll have my freedom. And Margaret will be somewhere she can get the help she needs. Everyone wins. Everyone wins. My husband of 30 years, writing to my sister about putting me in an institution and calling it a win? I don't remember much about that night. The hours blurred together. I might have slept. I might have just sat there until morning, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. I sat in Richard's chair with his files on my lap, the leather cold against my legs, his ghost all around me, his aftershave, his books, his lies. I looked at his things, his diplomas on the wall, his awards and certificates, his framed photos of our family. There I was, smiling in a dozen pictures. That careful smile. The one from the hidden box? The unknowing mark in a 30-year con. I'd trusted him. I'd loved him. I'd built my entire life around him. And he'd been planning my destruction from before our wedding day. The sun came up eventually. Orange light through the window. A new day. A different world. I was still there. Still holding the folder of emails. Still trying to make my brain accept what my eyes had seen. Everything I knew was wrong. Everything I believed was a lie. I wasn't the difficult daughter. I wasn't the unstable wife. I wasn't the mother who couldn't be trusted. I was the victim, the target, the mark, and now I was awake. The first person I called was my daughter. It was 7 a.m., too early for Melissa, who'd never been a morning person, who inherited her father's love of sleeping in, who would not be happy to hear from me at this hour. I didn't care. She answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep, annoyed before she even heard what I had to say. Mom, it's barely 7 o'clock. Is something wrong? Such a simple question. Is something wrong? How do you answer that? When everything is wrong, when everything has always been wrong, when wrong is all there ever was. I found Dad's emails to Aunt Patricia. The silence went on so long I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. The phone still connected. The seconds still ticking. My daughter still breathing on the other end. Not speaking. Then, oh, just, oh, not, what emails? Not, what are you talking about? Just, oh, like she knew. Like she'd been waiting. You knew. It wasn't a question. Mom, it's complicated. Her voice had changed. Careful now. Measured. Choosing each word. The voice of someone who's been caught. Did you know they were going to have me committed? Another long silence. I could hear her breathing. Fast. Shallow. The breathing of someone deciding what to say. How much to admit. How to survive this conversation. They said you were sick. They said it was for your own good. Aunt Patricia explained that sometimes families have to make hard choices. She said you'd fight it if you knew, but that you'd be happier in the end. Happier. In a psychiatric facility, away from everyone I love. Alone until I died. Happier. Patricia was sleeping with your father. That's not. Her voice went small. Young. Like the little girl she used to be. The one who climbed into my lap during thunderstorms. The one who asked me to check for monsters under the bed. They said you'd react like this. They said you'd make accusations. That it was part of your condition. They said, Melissa. I kept my voice calm. I don't know how. I don't know where I found that calm. I don't have a condition. I have a husband and a sister who spent 30 years convincing everyone I was crazy so they could steal my life, including you. My daughter started crying. I could hear the sobs through the phone. But not for me, I realized. For herself, for the position this put her in, for the story that was falling apart around her, for the choice she'd made, the side she'd picked, the mother she'd abandoned. Mom, I didn't know everything. I swear. They said you needed help. Dad talked about it all the time. How worried he was. How he couldn't handle you alone anymore. How he needed Aunt Patricia's support. Patricia's support. I bet he did. I bet he needed it desperately. Late nights and hotel rooms and plans for my destruction. My son David had known less. He was the younger one. Less involved in family politics. More distant. Already pulling away before the lies were complete. But he'd still believed them. He'd still thought his mother was fragile, difficult, probably losing her mind, too unstable to be trusted with the truth. I'm sorry, Mom. His voice on the phone sounded hollow, like a man realizing something terrible, something he can't take back. I should have been there more. I should have checked on you myself. Dad always said you were better off with fewer visitors. That too many people stressed you out. Too many people might have noticed. Too many witnesses. That's what he meant. I didn't blame my children. Not completely. Not the way I blamed Richard and Patricia. They were young when this started. Just kids. They'd been raised on these lies. Fed poison with their breakfast cereal. Taught that their mother was broken. That she couldn't be trusted. That she needed to be managed. Richard was their father. The stable one. The one who explained things. The one who seemed so reasonable. Patricia was their beloved aunt who sent generous birthday checks. Who took them to the zoo. Who bought them presents I couldn't afford. Who was always so concerned about their welfare. I was just their mother. The one who cried sometimes. The one who forgot things. The one who needed to be managed. The one who wasn't quite right. I understood why they believed it. I'd almost believed it myself. I'd spent years wondering if maybe they were right, if maybe I was the problem. For 3 days, I didn't leave Richard's office. I slept on the floor, ate crackers from a box I found in his desk drawer, drank water from the bathroom tap. I read everything again, every email, every letter, every card my parents had sent. I made copies of everything, photos on my phone, scans to a cloud drive. Printed duplicates hidden in different places. I wasn't going to let anyone destroy this evidence. I organized it into a timeline. 30 years of my life dissected and documented 1,993. First email between Richard and Patricia. 1,994. Plan to intercept mail begins. 1,996. First complaint about my memory lapses. 2001. Phone number changed without my knowledge. 2008. Facility research begins. 2015. Forged will executed. The question was, what to do with it? The obvious answer was lawyers. Take it to court. Sway Patricia for fraud. Contest the will. File whatever charges might apply. Forgery. Conspiracy. Theft. But here's the thing about lawyers. That process would take years. Depositions. Discovery. Motions and counter-motions. Delays and continuances. Patricia would hire lawyers of her own. Good ones. Expensive ones. She had the money now, my parents' money. She could fight for decades if she wanted. It would be her word against documents she'd claim were forged, fabricated by a crazy sister. Exactly the kind of paranoid delusion she'd warned everyone about. The evidence of my mental illness right there in black and white. And in the end, even if I won, what would I have? Money I'd have to spend on legal fees. Vindication that came from a judge, not from the people who mattered. Years more of my life consumed by this mess. I'd already lost 30 years. I wasn't willing to lose more. I didn't want their money. That surprised me. I thought I'd want it. I thought I'd want everything they'd taken. Every penny, every possession, every piece of what should have been mine. But sitting in Richard's office, I realized what I actually wanted. I wanted people to know. I wanted everyone who'd ever looked at me with pity to understand what had really happened. I wanted Patricia to lose the one thing she valued most, her reputation. My sister had always cared deeply about what people thought. Even as a child, always performing, always watching to see who was watching her, always curating her image. She was on charity boards. 4 of them? Maybe 5. Her name on letterheads and donor walls. She hosted fundraisers, expensive parties in her expensive house, where expensive people wrote expensive checks, and talked about how wonderful Patricia was. She had a beautiful house and a distinguished husband. The perfect life, the life she'd stolen from me, built on my parents' money and my suffering. Everyone thought she was wonderful, generous, devoted to her family and community, a pillar of society, a model of grace. Every year in September, Patricia hosted a gala for the Children's Hospital. She'd done it for 15 years. Her signature event, her crown jewel, the proof that she was a good person, a woman of uncommon generosity, a blessing to everyone who knew her. The gala was in 6 weeks. Patricia was being honored this year with a Lifetime Achievement Award for her decades of philanthropy, her tireless dedication, her extraordinary character. Her photo would be in the program. Her speech would be printed in the newsletter. 300 people would gather to celebrate how wonderful she was. I started planning. The first thing I did was nothing visible. I didn't call Patricia. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell anyone else what I'd found. I needed her comfortable, unsuspecting, going about her life like everything was normal, like her brother-in-law's death was sad but not significant, like her sister was still the confused woman she'd always been. If I confronted her now, she'd have time to prepare, time to spin, time to craft her story, time to warn the people who might believe me. I couldn't give her that. The second thing I did was reach out to people I'd lost. Old friends whose numbers I'd somehow misplaced. College roommates I'd drifted apart from. Neighbors who'd moved away and never wrote. I found them on social media, Facebook pages and Instagram accounts, LinkedIn profiles and personal websites. The digital footprints of lives that had continued without me. I sent careful messages. Brief, non-threatening, just testing the water. I know it's been years. I'm not sure what happened between us, but I'd like to reconnect if you're open to it. The responses broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Margaret, I've wondered about you for 20 years. Your husband said you didn't want to hear from me anymore. He said I'd upset you somehow. He said you needed space from old friends. I never understood what I did wrong. Is this really you? I tried to call for years. The number was always disconnected. Richard told someone at your church that you'd moved away, that you wanted a fresh start. I thought you were done with all of us. Margaret, I have to tell you something. Your sister called me in 2008. She said you were having a breakdown. She said it was better if your old friends didn't reach out, that we might trigger something. I felt terrible, but I believed her. One by one, the missing pieces came back. The friends who'd been pushed away, the connections that had been severed, the relationships that had been murdered. Richard and Patricia had been thorough. They'd isolated me from everyone who might have questioned things. Everyone who might have said, "Wait, that doesn't sound like Margaret." Everyone who might have noticed the cage being built. My friend Barbara drove 4 hours to see me. We'd been roommates in college, best friends for years after, then nothing. Silence, like she'd never existed. She walked through my door and burst into tears. This woman I'd known since we were 18, standing in my living room. Sobbing? "I thought you hated me," she said, her voice cracking, her mascara running. "For 23 years, I thought I'd done something unforgivable. I've replayed every conversation trying to figure out what. I thought the same about you. We sat in my kitchen and talked until midnight. I made coffee, then wine, then more coffee, the hours disappearing like they used to. Back when we were young and nothing could separate us." I showed her the emails. She read them with shaking hands, page after page, her face going pale, then red with anger. "Margaret, this is genuinely monstrous. These people are monsters. What are you going to do?" I told her about the gala, about Patricia's award, about the 300 people who thought they knew my sister. Barbara's eyes went wide. Then she laughed. It was a good laugh, a wicked laugh. The laugh of a woman who'd been waiting decades for permission to be angry. "I always knew there was something wrong with that woman," she said. "Too perfect, too polished. Nobody's actually that put together. Tell me how I can help." We planned it like a military operation. Nights on the phone, lists and timelines, contingencies for everything. Barbara knew people in that world. Fundraiser people, society page people, the kind of people who knew everyone and talked to everyone else. Her husband's family had a charitable foundation. Old money, respected. The kind of family that got invited everywhere. She made some calls, asked some questions, dropped some hints, got me a seat at Patricia's table. 2 weeks before the gala, Patricia's assistant called me. Young voice, professional, reading from a script. "Mrs. Morrison, we understand you'll be attending as a guest of the Sullivan Foundation. Is that correct?" I said yes. The Sullivan Foundation was Barbara's husband's family charity. They were major donors. They could bring anyone they wanted. And they wanted to bring me. Wonderful. "Mrs. Morrison, we should mention Patricia Lawson is your sister, correct?" "She is." "Mrs. Lawson wasn't aware you'd be attending. She asked us to confirm whether you'd like to be seated together." I smiled into the phone. Patricia checking up on me, worried about what I might do, trying to control the situation even now. "That would be lovely," I said. I haven't seen Patricia in so long. It would mean so much to surprise her. The assistant hesitated. I could almost hear her weighing whether to say something, whether to warn Patricia, whether something about this felt wrong. "Of course, I'm sure she'll be delighted." The gala was held in a renovated warehouse downtown. Exposed brick and steel beams, the kind of space that used to hold machinery and now holds rich people. They'd transformed it into something magical. White lights strung from the rafters like stars. Towering flower arrangements on every table. Orchids and roses and things I couldn't name. The air thick with perfume and money. A string quartet played something classical and soothing. Violins weaving through the conversation. Making everything feel elegant, important, civilized. 300 people in evening wear. Black tuxedos and designer gowns. Diamonds catching the light. Champagne catching the light. Everything catching everything. They sipped champagne and congratulated themselves on caring about children, on writing checks they'd never miss, on being the kind of people who gave back. I wore my mother's pearls. I hadn't worn them in years. Richard always said they were too old-fashioned, that they made me look matronly, that I should wear something more modern, more appropriate, more like what other women were wearing. But my mother gave them to me on my wedding day. Before everything changed, before the lies began. Before Richard started his work, I wanted her with me tonight. Her pearls around my neck, her strength in my spine, her voice in my head saying, "You are a good daughter." Before everything changed, before the lies began, before Richard started his work, I wanted her with me tonight. her pearls around my neck, her strength in my spine, her voice in my head saying, "You are a good daughter." Patricia was holding court near the entrance when I arrived, surrounded by admirers, laughing at their jokes, touching their arms, working the room like the professional she was. She looked beautiful, of course. Silver dress that probably cost more than my car. Sequins catching every light in the room. Professional blowout, every hair in place. The smile she'd perfected over decades of working rooms like this. She didn't see me at first. I had time to watch her. To really look at my sister. This woman who had stolen my parents, who had taken their final years, who had made them die thinking I didn't love them. This woman who had stolen my husband, who had been sleeping with him since before we were married, who had laughed with him about my gullibility. This woman who had stolen my sanity, who had made me doubt my own mind, who had convinced doctors I was losing my grip on reality. This woman who had stolen my entire adult life, 30 years, 10,000 days, all of it taken. She looked so normal. That was the strangest part. She looked like a nice woman, a generous woman, a woman you'd trust with your mother's care, a woman you'd admire from across a room. Then she turned. Our eyes met across 20 feet of hardwood floor, and I watched the color drain from her face. Margaret. Her voice was perfectly controlled. 30 years of practice. Only her eyes showed the panic. What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. Surprise, I said brightly. My voice cheerful. My smile wide. I'm at your table, actually. Isn't that wonderful? We can catch up. It's been so long since we really talked. I watched her calculate, the wheels turning behind those careful eyes. Would she have me removed? On what grounds? I was a properly invited guest. The Sullivan Foundation had vouched for me. I hadn't done anything wrong, and any scene would be noticed, remembered, whispered about, photographed probably, posted to social media. Patricia Lawson kicks sister out of charity gala. Not a good look. How? Nice. She smiled her perfect smile, tight around the edges. We'll have so much to talk about. Dinner was excruciating. For her, I enjoyed myself immensely. The salmon was excellent. Perfectly cooked. Light sauce. I cleaned my plate. I made small talk with the other donors. Lovely people. Committed to children's health. Fascinated to hear about my family connection to the honoree. I complimented the flower arrangements. Patricia has such wonderful taste. She's always known how to create an atmosphere. I asked Patricia about her charity work with great interest. Tell me more about the hospital. What exactly does the foundation fund? How did you get involved? Every time she started to relax, I mentioned something that tightened her shoulders again. Remember that summer at Mom and Dad's lake house? Such good memories. Dad taught me to fish off that dock. Do you ever go back there? I watched her flinch. The lake house that was supposed to be mine, that our father left to me in his real will. I was thinking about Mom's lemon cake the other day. I found her recipe in some old papers. She sent it to me in a letter. One of the many, many letters. Her wine glass trembled in her hand. The letters I wasn't supposed to know about. The letters she'd hidden for 15 years. Richard used to love these events. He always said you threw the best parties. Of course, you two spent so much time planning together. All those meetings, all those late nights. By the time they served dessert, Patricia was visibly sweating, her perfect makeup starting to crack, the foundation beginning to show, the mask beginning to slip. Margaret, she whispered when the others at our table were distracted by a minor wine spill, her voice urgent, her eyes desperate. I don't know what you think you know, but this isn't the time or place. You're right, I said. The time and place is in about 20 minutes. When you give your speech, her hand trembled, just a little, just enough. The hand that had signed forged documents, The hand that had held my husband, the hand that had waved goodbye to our dying parents. What are you going to do? I took a sip of my wine. It was excellent wine, expensive wine. Patricia always had excellent taste. Funded by my parents' money. I'm going to listen to your speech, Patricia. I'm very interested to hear about your lifetime of generosity, your commitment to helping others, your devotion to family. Margaret, please. The MC was approaching the podium, a tall man in a perfectly fitted tuxedo, smiling at the crowd, preparing to introduce the evening's honoree. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. You should go, I said. They're about to introduce you. Break a leg. I honestly don't remember most of Patricia's speech. Something about the importance of giving back. Something about how fortunate she'd been. Something about family values. Something about how our parents taught her the meaning of service. Our parents, the ones she'd stolen from me. The ones who died thinking I didn't love them. The ones whose wills she'd forged. The ones whose memory she was using to burnish her own image. When she finished, the room applauded. 300 pairs of hands. 300 people who believed they were honoring a good woman. Patricia beamed. She was back in her element. The moment of danger had passed. She'd gotten through the dinner. She'd gotten through the sideways comments. Whatever I'd been planning, I hadn't done it. The MC returned to the podium. We have time for one more speaker before we open the dance floor. Margaret Morrison has asked to say a few words about her sister. Patricia's head whipped toward me. The color drained from her face again. This time, it didn't come back. I walked to the podium slowly, one foot in front of the other, my mother's pearls cool against my throat, my heart pounding, my hands steady. I was aware of every eye in the room. 300 people, Patricia's people, the people who thought they knew her, the people who were about to learn the truth. Good evening, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. I'd expected fear. I'd expected trembling. Instead, I felt calm. Calm and clear and absolutely certain. My name is Margaret Morrison. Patricia is my sister, and I want to tell you a story about family. I told them about our parents, about the house I grew up in, about the lake where Dad taught me to fish, about the lemon cake Mom made for every celebration, about how close we'd been when I was young, how I'd carried Patricia on my hip, how I'd taught her to ride a bike, how I thought we'd be friends forever, about how somewhere in my 30s they seemed to pull away. My parents going distant, cold, asking me not to come anymore, about the letters I wrote that were never answered. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, pouring out my heart to parents who never wrote back, about the phone calls that went to voicemail, numbers that stopped working, connections that went dead, about my mother's funeral, which happened without me, a daughter not told her mother had died, a daughter not invited to say goodbye, about my father dying while asking for me, calling my name, wanting his daughter, while I sat 4 hours away, not knowing. I kept my voice steady. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying already. 3 weeks of it. Now I just wanted them to understand. 3 weeks ago, my husband Richard died. Richard and Patricia were close. Very close. Closer than I knew. I paused. Let that land. Watched understanding dawn on faces around the room. The implications sinking in. The whispers beginning. When I cleaned out his office, I found a box. Hidden in his closet. Locked. Kept from me for decades. In that box were 20 years of emails between my husband and my sister. Love letters. Plans. Conspiracies. And some letters from my parents to me that were never delivered. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, her voice sharp, desperate. This is inappropriate. Margaret is unwell. She's been unwell for years. This is exactly the kind of episode we've been worried about. I smiled at her. The emails described that too, actually. The plan to have me diagnosed, the doctors they cultivated, the symptoms they invented, the facility they'd chosen. The room was utterly silent. 300 people frozen in their seats, forks suspended over dessert plates, glasses half raised, everyone staring. The plan to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. Somewhere quiet, somewhere private. Visitors discouraged. Staff who wouldn't ask questions. Perfect for making me disappear. Perfect for clearing the way for Richard and Patricia to be together. Patricia's husband was standing now, too, his face gray, his hands gripping the back of his chair. He looked like he might be sick. Patricia? What is she talking about? She's lying. She's confused. Margaret has always been unstable. They also described the forged will. My voice cut through hers, clear and calm and carrying. The one that gave Patricia our parents' estate, instead of the original will, which I also found, that left it to me. I have both wills. I have the emails that discuss the forgery. I have 20 years of evidence. Every email, every plan, every lie. I have the emails here. I held up a folla, the manila folder from Richard's box, the evidence of my destruction. Would you like to read them? Would anyone like to read them? They're quite detailed. Richard was a thorough correspondent. He documented everything. Names, dates, plans, everything. Barbara had positioned herself near the exits, not blocking them, just present, making sure everyone stayed long enough to hear, making sure Patricia couldn't slip away. I read selected passages aloud. The plan to intercept the mail, Richard's words. What if Margaret's letters never arrived? The strategy to isolate me from friends and family. Patricia's words. Tell her old friends she doesn't want contact. The discussions about my condition? The love letters. The plans for what would happen when this is finally over. When I finished, the room was still. Nobody looked at Patricia. They looked at their plates, their shoes, the flower arrangements, anywhere else. Anywhere but at the woman they'd been celebrating. I'm not going to sue my sister, I said. I'm not going to try to get the money back. That's not why I'm here. I looked out at the sea of faces. All those people who'd thought they knew my sister, who'd thought they knew the truth. I'm here because my parents died thinking their daughter didn't love them. I'm here because I spent 30 years believing I was losing my mind. I'm here because every person in this room has spent the evening celebrating a woman who systematically destroyed her own sister's life. I thought you should know who you were honoring. I set the folder on the podium, left it there. A gift for anyone who wanted the whole story. These are copies. Anyone who wants to read the full record is welcome to it. I've also provided copies to the board of every charity Patricia serves on. They can decide for themselves whether she represents their values. I looked at Patricia one last time. My baby sister, the one I'd carried on my hip, the one I'd loved since the day she was born, the one who'd spent 30 years destroying me. She was crying now. Beautiful Patricia, with her perfect makeup running down her perfect face. Gray tracks of mascara on carefully contoured cheeks. 20 years of planning undone in 20 minutes. I forgive you, I said. And I realized as I said it that it was true, not because she deserved it. She didn't. Not because what she did was forgivable. It wasn't. But because I refused to carry it anymore. Because the anger was heavy and I was tired of being heavy. Because forgiveness was freedom and I wanted to be free. Not for your sake. For mine, I'm not going to spend another 30 years carrying this. You've taken enough of my life. You don't get the rest of it. I walked out of the ballroom, one foot in front of the other, through the silent room, past the staring faces, past the abandoned desserts, past the flower arrangements and the string quartet. Barbara fell into step beside me, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her hand finding mine, squeezing once. Solidarity, friendship. 23 years of lost time, suddenly recovered. Neither of us said anything until we reached her car. The night air cool on my face. The stars visible above the city lights. The same stars my father used to point out on the dock at the lake house. Then we both started laughing. The giddy, relieved laughter of people who've just done something terrifying. And survived. Did you see her face? Barbara said. When you started reading the emails, I thought she was going to pass out right there on the carpet. Her husband looked worse. That's because he was doing the math. On what he didn't know? On what else she might have lied about over the years? On whether their whole marriage was real. Barbara shook her head, her earrings catching the light, her smile wide and wicked and wonderful. He'll file for divorce within the month. Mark my words. She was right, as it turned out. 3 weeks. Patricia's husband filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew what that really meant. Everyone had heard my speech. Everyone had read the emails. The charity boards were faster. Patricia resigned from all 6 within 10 days. Quiet announcements, gracious thanks for her years of service. Immediate removal of her name from everything. Her annual gala was canceled for next year. No replacement. No successor. Just silence where Patricia used to be. The Children's Hospital issued a statement thanking her for her years of service and wishing her well in her time of transition. That's society. Speak for, please never contact us again. As for the inheritance, I did end up getting some of it back. Not through lawyers, not through courts, through Patricia's husband. He found more evidence in their home files. Things Patricia had kept, things she shouldn't have kept. Enough to confirm the forgery. Enough to make Patricia very eager to settle quietly. She kept the house. I didn't want it anyway. Too many lies soaked into those walls. Too many memories that weren't real. Igot a check. It wasn't everything my parents had left. But it was something. More importantly, I got their letters. The real ones. The ones Richard had hidden. 30 years of my mother's handwriting. 20 years of my father's. Birthday cards and Christmas cards and thinking of you cards. Letters about their lives. Letters asking about mine. Letters wondering where I'd gone. Letters hoping I'd come back. I hadn't been forgotten. I hadn't been abandoned. I'd been stolen from. And now I'd stolen some of that time back. I have the letters framed now. They hang in my new apartment. A wall of my parents' love. Proof that I was always their daughter. Yes, I moved. I couldn't stay in Richard's house. Couldn't sleep in his bed. Couldn't sit in his chair. Too many lies soaked into the walls. Too many ghosts I didn't want to live with. I found a bright place with big windows and no history at all. Small, simple, clean. A place that was only mine. A place where everything was true. My children visit sometimes. It's awkward still. There's a lot to work through. 30 years of lies don't disappear overnight. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. They're both in therapy now, trying to understand how they were manipulated, trying to forgive themselves for believing it, trying to figure out who their mother really is, who their father really was. I don't push. I've learned that lesson. I just leave the door open. Let them come when they're ready. Let them ask questions when they can. Let time do what time does. Barbara and I have dinner every week. Wednesday nights, my place or hers. Wine and conversation and 23 years of catching up. My other friends have come back too. On be on. The people I lost. The connections that were severed. They found their way back when they heard the truth. It turns out when you lift a 30-year fog of lies, people are still waiting on the other side. Still wondering what happened. Still hoping you're okay. Still ready to be friends again. Some nights, I sit on my little balcony with a glass of wine. The city lights spread out below me. The stars, barely visible through the glow. But I know they're there. The same stars my father pointed out at the lake house. I think about my mother, what she would say if she could see me now, if she could know the truth, if she could understand what happened. I think she'd be proud. Not of the galest speech, though she might have appreciated the drama. Mom always did enjoy a good scene. Always said I was too quiet, too willing to let things go, too afraid of making waves. But she'd be proud of the rest of it, the rebuilding, the choosing to live, the refusing to let them take anything more. I'm 63 now. I have maybe 20 good years left. Maybe more, maybe less. Nobody knows what the future holds. I intend to spend them being exactly who I am. No more pretending. No more wondering if I'm crazy. No more waiting for permission to exist. No more asking if I'm good enough. No more trying to be what someone else wants. It turns out I'm pretty good company. I just needed to meet myself. I wonder sometimes if forgiveness was the right choice. Whether Patricia deserved that grace, whether I gave her too much, let her off too easy. But here's what I've learned. Revenge and freedom can look the same from the outside. Both involve confrontation. Both involve truth. Both involve walking away from what was. But only one of them lets you sleep at night. Only one of them doesn't poison what comes next. Only one of them leaves room for joy. I chose freedom. I chose to put down the weight. I chose to stop carrying what they'd given me. Not because they deserved it, because I did. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been lying all along? That your whole story had a different author? That the life you thought you were living was written by someone else? I'd love to hear about it if you're willing to share. Because you're not alone. Because it happens more than people think. Because sometimes the monsters aren't strangers. They're the people who are supposed to love you, taking your story back. The first step toward becoming your own author. The first step toward writing what comes next. On your own terms. In your own voice. With your own truth. Finally,